Well, I have a couple of reactions to that. First of all, a lot of the columns that were written about that were not altogether flattering to either one of us. And I had half a mind to call Mr. Blair during the election and offer to attack him in the harshest possible terms if he thought it might free him of an unwanted yoke. And now I also told you today that there is one big difference, and that's the enormous parliamentary majority that the Prime Minister enjoys. So I should be here learning from New Labor instead of the other way around. Let me just give you a serious answer. I believe that the free peoples in the world are interested in democratic governments that work, that have constructive economic policies, that try to reconcile the imperative of growth with the imperatives of family and neighborhood and community, that do not accept the fact that our social problems will always worsen and cannot be made better, that do not promise to do things which responsible citizens must do for themselves, but which don't run away from their own responsibilities. That's what I think. And I think the more the more people see the issues framed in terms of attacks of parties on each other in yesterday's language that seems disconnected to their own concerns, their own hopes, and their own problems, the more faith is lost in politics. The more people see the political process is relevant to their lives and their future, the more energy you have. And what I sense in Great Britain today is an enormous amount of energy. So if you're asking me to rate the beginning, I'd say that's a great thing. It's a great thing when the people of a democracy believe in its possibilities and are willing to work for them. That is about all you can ask. No one has all the answers, but you want people to believe in the possibilities of a nation and be willing to work for them. Yes, Ron? Well, let me say, first of all, we have a new British government that has taken what I think were wise and judicious steps and made statements that I think are clear, unequivocal, and appropriate. There is about to be an election in Ireland. The United States, I have restated what the poll stars of our position are today. An unequivocal ceasefire, inclusive talks. But I think before I say or do anything more, as with every peace, this is a peace that has to be made by the parties themselves, and we need to let this unfold a little. But we'll be there, active and involved along the way. Now, as to Iran, obviously it's a very interesting development, and for those of us who don't feel privy to all the details of daily life in that country, it's at least a reaffirmation of the democratic process there. And it's interesting and it's hopeful. But from the point of view of the United States, what we hope for is a reconciliation with a country that does not believe that terrorism is a legitimate extension of political policies, that would not use violence to wreck a peace process in the Middle East, and would not be trying to develop weapons of mass destruction. I have never been pleased about the estrangements between the people of the United States and the people of Iran. They are a very great people, and I hope that the estrangement can be bridged. But those are three big hurdles that would have to be cleared, and we'll just have to hope for the best.
Thanks. Robin.
I don't believe I should make a public comment on that at this moment. Tony Blair's government has just come into office. As I said, I think they've taken some very impressive and appropriate steps. There's about to be an Irish election. I think at this moment for the American president to start specifying that level of detail would be inappropriate. Prime Minister and I both should answer your first question, so let me answer the second question very briefly. Our last estimate was, or more than an estimate, in the last defense report we got, the estimate was more in the range of $150 to $200 million a year. They are reviewing our defense commitments now, I should point this out, the cost will be important because for most European countries, the relative cost will be greater than for the United States, because we've already done some of the structural things that European countries have to do, most of them. So I do not expect that that larger figure is anywhere close to the ballpark. Secondly, the security umbrella we have is really no longer dependent upon stationing large armies along the eastern frontier of NATO. What kept any NATO nation from being attacked, in my judgment, was the larger nuclear deterrent that was present during the Cold War. Now, we're also trying to reduce that, but keep in mind, see the NATO expansion in the context of the following things. There's an agreement between NATO and Russia about what our relationships are going to be. President Yeltsin just agreed to de-target the nuclear missiles against all the NATO countries. We will have an agreement on conventional forces in Europe, which will further reduce those of our times like Bosnia.
I agree very much with that, and I think what is important is to see NATO enlargement, and indeed the joint council between NATO and Russia, as part of building the security and defence of our countries, and indeed making sure that the commitments that we have are fully realisable. Now, we announced just a couple of days ago a strategic review of our defence, which is foreign policy led. It's not about downsizing our armed forces, but it is about making sense of the commitments that we have. But I think that NATO enlargement is a very, very important part of bringing in those emerging countries in Eastern Europe, and ensuring also, through cooperation with Russia, that we're doing it in a way that preserves the security of the world. And I can't think of anything more important for that. So I don't see these as conflicting objectives. On the contrary, I see them properly implemented as entirely complementary. Yes, Charles.
Charles Rice, Evening Standard. Mr. President, although there is an area of cooperation between the government and Europe, there is a conflict apparently on the way between the push by the Prime Minister for more flexible labour markets and the call from Brussels for more social legislation. Is the Prime Minister right to warn against the dangers of this? And secondly, while you're in London, you've said you wanted to go out and about a bit. What is it you're looking forward to see most?
Well, I've already seen part of what I want to see most, which is the unique and unspeakably beautiful British spring. I was so hoping it would be sunny today. Let me say, on the other question, there is not a simple answer. The great challenge for Europe, and more for other countries even than for the United Kingdom, because your unemployment rate is already lower than, well, I've already seen part of what I want to see most, which is the unique and unspeakably beautiful British spring. I was so hoping it would be sunny today. Let me say, on the other question, there is not a simple answer. The great challenge for Europe, and more for other countries even than for the United Kingdom, because your unemployment rate is already lower than some, but the great challenge you face is how to create enough jobs to be competitive and to promote not only economic growth, but to have a good society. A successful society requires that able-bodied adults be able to work. Successful families, successful communities, low crime rates, all require that able-bodied adults be able to spend their energies a certain number of hours a day at work, quite apart from the economic considerations. So the question is, how do you do that? How do you become more flexible? How do you have more entrepreneurs, more flexible labor markets, and still preserve the social cohesion that has made community life strong in Europe, justifiably? In the United States, find a way to give those working families, make sure they can all afford health care for their children, make sure they can have some time off when there's a baby born or a parent sick. You know, we're trying to deal with the arguments from the other way, but the imperative of reconciling work and family and providing some social safety net so that the conditions of community can be met while having growth, that is the balance striking that every advanced economy has to do. And I think what the Prime Minister has said that I thoroughly agree with is the one option that is unacceptable is denial. That's the only unacceptable. There is no perfect answer. I'd be the last person to tell you that we've drawn the perfect balance. We're better at creating jobs than nearly anybody, but we don't have quite as much family security and support as I'd like to see in the area of child care and family leave and other things. The one thing there is not an option to do is to deny that this is an issue anymore. The United States wants a higher growth rate in Europe. We don't feel threatened by it. We think it would help us, and we hope you can achieve it.
If I can just add just one. Look, we are all facing, as modern developed countries, the same challenges. Work is changing, industry is changing, we live in a new type of world economy, there are different pressures putting together work and family life. Now, what we're all trying to do is to make sure that we can be fully competitive as we need to be in this new economy, whilst preserving the essential foundations of a humane and decent society. Now, that is the very goal. That's why education and welfare are important. That's why the type of different agenda that I think that a different generation of politicians is reaching towards is actually what is necessary, not just here, not just in the United States, but all over the developed world. And if we can bring together some of those lessons from the US, from Britain, and from Europe, then we'll find better ways of going forward in Europe as well as the USA.
Sean. I'll take both of you.